Hi everybody and welcome to Merriam Pianos here on YouTube. My name is Stu Harrison and today it's our first look at Kawai's DG30. It's their brand new mini baby grand digital piano, whatever you want to call it. It is certainly lovely to look at and a lot of fun to play. We're going to be talking about its action, its sound, first general impressions, and sharing it with you, our YouTube audience, right here, right now. If it's the first time that you are joining us on the channel, please subscribe. We'd love to have you back for more videos. We really love when people comment and join in and participate in this piano exploration, this piano world that we all love to inhabit. So without further ado, let's get started with Kawai's DG30 right away. Hi everybody, like always we are going to start with a discussion of the sound on the DG30. Before we get into the specs, let me just give you a bit of preamble because I don't know, I usually do. The DG30 is a piano that I heard about all the way back at NAMM 2020. This was a piano that I saw some pre-production photos of. I was very excited. We'd all been begging Kawai, this is completely the truth, begging Kawai for decades to build an instrument like this. We knew there was a market out there for it. We knew that Kawai did cabinets at a high enough level, and obviously the action and the the sound componentry was not going to be a problem. Just build the thing, customers are going to love it. So we were really, really excited that Kawai finally had turned the corner and had decided they were going to go down this route of an affordable, small, digital baby grand piano, and it came in the form of the DG30. Now, when I initially got a hold of the specs, to be honest, I was a little bit underwhelmed. I don't want to say disappointed, but when you think about the very first time somebody's going to come out with a model in a brand new category, you're wanting them to just like obliterate all of the expectations and the competition that's going to be out there. And so I was wanting, like a Novus 10 XL to be out there the first time Kawai did it. And then I thought to myself, well, yeah, sure, but it means that we'd have to be selling these things for $15,000, and that's really not the point. So I think I've come back to earth. I've reconciled my expectations with what's actually been delivered. And now having played this for, I don't know, couple of hours now, really playing around with the virtual technician settings, enjoying it as an instrument, I really like it. I think it's a satisfying piano, and it's taken me a few hours of playing it to figure out why I'm enjoying it so much. Because this is more or less, on paper anyway, a CN39 built into a small grand case. This is identical in terms of the tone chip, the tone generating motherboard that they've co-developed with Onkyo. It's identical in terms of the overall power that the amplifier has. It's exactly the same action. It's exactly the same sound set. You've got the SKEX and the EX and the SK5 sample set. I mean, right across the board, this really is a CN39. But this gives me something more than a CN39 does. And I've been sitting here trying to figure out what it is. Like, is it just an emotional bias because I'm behind something that looks like a grand, so I'm sort of fooling myself into thinking that there's more than what's there? But no, there are some things that I've finally really started to nail down, and I'd love to get Kawai's input on this, either in the comments or you can send me an email. Would love to know. There is definitely something that's a different experience about playing this than playing the CN39. So let's get that out of the way for those who are already in the mode of researching specific models and wondering what this gives that a CN39 would not. So I'll speak a little bit more about that after we get through the specs. So let's deal with what this delivers. So this has a pair of 20-watt amplifiers. So Kawai says that this delivers a total power of 40 watts. It has two tweeters which deliver the high frequencies. That's placed sort of in this soundboard area, and then we've got two main speakers that face the floor, and those deliver obviously the bulk of the wattage, the bulk of the power. It uses the progressive harmonic imaging chip, which is the same one that you find in the CN29, the CN39, and the CA49. That flips to harmonic imaging XL when you hit the CA59. So it's not quite the same chip set as you get in the CA59, but same as everything else underneath. And it has like 355 sounds in it, which is obviously way more than what anyone ever needs, but it is fun to play around with it, particularly since the vast majority of those are pretty high quality sounds. They're very believable, and especially I always like how Kawai does the organs, the vintage EPs, and the acoustic pianos. I think are three huge strong suits for Kawai that you can tell that they've focused the time and energy to get those right. It's exactly the same control as the CN39 has as well. So you've got this nice, easy to navigate cheek block control panel here, where you can access all of the different acoustic pianos and e-pianos and, well, all of the 355. It's also Bluetooth compatible, both in terms of Bluetooth MIDI as well as Bluetooth audio. So you can use this as a Bluetooth speaker, which is pretty cool. And the Bluetooth MIDI also means that you can hook this up and control it using a couple of various Kawai apps. We've shown them to you in some of the other videos, so I'm not going to do that right here, but they are available. The polyphony on this, the maximum polyphony is 256, more than enough, but actually becomes a little more relevant when you are playing, say, 16 tracks of MIDI back through this. If you were going to use this as kind of an outlet for a general MIDI 2 file, format 1 type of thing, you actually do use up and utilize quite a bit of that 256 note polyphony. So as I've talked about with the CAs and the CNs, I guess the biggest parts of the sound technology on this piano really are the fact that it is a collaborative effort with Onkyo, and that they have done a really phenomenal job sampling both the SKEX, the EX, and the SK5. So I'm going to play some of the piano so that it's just not talking for the next 15 minutes, but then I am going to circle back and we're going to have a quick conversation about that sample bank as well as what Onkyo has done to contribute to the experience of playing this DG30. So what you're hearing right there is the SKEX sample, and I am using one of the smart presets on the Virtual Technician called RHIII. This is a label that Kawai has given it, but it's basically a set of presets that applies those 19 different editable parameters within the Virtual Technician to produce what they are calling RHIII. And sure, I'll go with that label. But there's also resonant, full resonant, light resonance, dark, bright. I've been playing around with those smart presets more and more, and I really enjoy them. It makes for an easy and quick way to experience the power of the virtual technician without having to completely go full nerd on it. So that's what you're hearing. Now we're also taking a line out of the piano, and that's stereo. But we are using two large diaphragm microphones that are placed just to the left and right behind my head so that we can capture with microphones as close to what I'm actually hearing as a player right now as well. And we're going to do a separate playing video where we basically alternate back and forth between that as well as the line out so you can hear the comparison between the two. We had some comments, and it was a great suggestion that the next time we did an instrument where the speaker system was a bit of a feature of the instrument, it'd be better to actually mic the piano to try and capture what the player would experience versus miking the piano in a way that would best capture the piano unto itself. So that's exactly what we've done. So we just heard the SKEX. And the sample sets that Kawai has captured for the progressive harmonic imaging, as well as the XL and everything up from there, is a really nice, thick, dense sample set. And so I've gone off on what sampling is in a few other videos. I don't want to take up too much time, but for those who are fresh to the concept of sampling and why it's so critical that you have individual 88-note samples for piano, is on a real piano, pitch is not the only difference when you're going from one note to another. So you're playing a C, you're playing a B, B flat A flat G, blah, 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 blah. But on a real piano, what's actually happening is every time you're playing a different note, that note has a slightly longer, sometimes slightly shorter string. Sometimes the thickness of that string is changing as you go from one note to another. And more dramatically, sometimes you switch between sections. So you go from a steel string to a copper wound string, and then sometimes it goes from 3 strings to 2 strings to 1. So the point is, there's almost never a situation where you have 2 notes that have exactly the same timbre across the piano. And so if you're only sampling, like most digital pianos do, say 1 every 4 notes or 1 out of every 5 notes, and you're basically just stretching the sample so that you're replicating or you're properly producing the different tones, but you're kind of just cheating, you're missing a huge amount of the realism that comes with playing an acoustic piano. And so great sample sets always have individual 88-note samples, and then multiple layers to that sample as well, so that you get the character of the sound when it's played softly as well as loudly. And this instrument has the SKEX, which is a real, their kind of flagship 9-foot piano, the EX, which is a slightly older style, it's a little bit of a brighter piano, and then an SK5, which is a 6'7", so it's kind of a studio size piano. So there's all in there. And if you're going to be playing any kind of an acoustic instrument or acoustic piano when you're on the DG30, you want to be using those 3, because that is the creme de la creme in here. I mean, that represents probably 2/3 of the technology in the whole thing out of that 355 voices. Those are the 3 voices that honestly you could keep those and get rid of everything else, and you'd still be left with a piano that was worth every penny that this instrument asks. So that's what's going on with the piano. And so I'll play, now this is the EX Concert Grand. then you've got the SK5. Then we get into some of the more basic samples. So studio piano. It's not quite as thick, but still a very usable sample. Studio Grand 2. Mellow Grand 2, and then finally back to Concert Grand. So those are the first piano 1 categories. Pop Grand, and then the classical E piano is another one. Yeah. Now, let's return to some of those talking points I was discussing a little bit earlier about why this is a different playing experience than the CN39, and my ear was just picking up a little bit of it here. The fact that the top speakers, the top tweeters, are further back than you would normally get on a digital piano, just by virtue of the fact that it's a deeper cabinet. It's not like there's a fancy design or some crackpot engineering thing going on here. You just move the speakers back about another 6 inches, and that changes how your ear not interprets, but how your ear is going to hear, is going to enjoy that particular sound coming from those speakers. It's not so direct. It kind of takes some of the harshness off the treble. But I'm also getting some reflection off the back edge, which I don't notice on some patches, but there's a few that I do. I don't get it off the acoustic pianos that much. Some of the brighter ones I do. But like on this E piano, there's just this kind of crystalline bell effect happening in sort of the top half that just makes it it's fun to just make sound. The other thing that I'm noticing, and I'd love again to hear from Kawai on this, is when I play some of the bass frequencies, particularly on the SK Concert Grand, I am getting a huge amount of activation from the soundboard surface. And at least by the description of the product, there's no active soundboard sort of resonator or a transducer that's connected to this thing. But it feels like they have either bridged it or connected it with some sort of cabinetry that's giving it a huge amount of activation off those lower speakers. Like, there is way more resonance coming off of that soundboard than I get off the cabinet. And certainly if I do the same thing on a CN39 or any other digital piano, you don't have that level of activation, of resonance off the cabinet. But when I put my hand on that soundboard, it almost feels as active as if I had my hand on a real soundboard. So at first I'm thinking, okay, this soundboard is nothing but looks. I don't think that's the case. Even if it's passive, they've managed to design this, or they've managed to get the carpentry happening in a way where there's a decent amount of energy that is getting transduced through that soundboard. Anyway, I do want to move on to the action, but just to sum up, 256 notes of maximum polyphony, 355 different voices to choose from, but really the centerpiece, full individual sample sets of the SK-EX, the EX, and the SK5, all being pushed through Onkyo signal processing amplifiers and speakers, and remarkably and unexpectedly, quite a bit of real acoustic effect coming from both the shape of the body as well as somehow the soundboard. I mean, if I couldn't feel it with my own hands, I'd say it was nothing but just marketing fluff if they had made that claim, but they're not even making the claim. This is me just noticing it, playing it for the first time. Huge amount of resonance coming out of that body. Anyway, we are going to be back in just a second with a discussion about the action. Thank you so much for being with us for this DG30. We'll be back in just a few minutes. They have strapped the RHIII, that's the responsive hammer 3 action, into the DG30. Now, this is not exactly the same as the first generation RHIII action that came out. And so why they haven't called this the RH4, I don't know. Maybe they've got something in store for the RH4. But I do know that this is not exactly the same thing as the first time the RH3 hit the market. I know this for sure because some of the ES8s that were the first ones that come out several years ago also had an RH3. But not only do the keys feel a little bit different, but I happen to know as a fact that the sensor strip has been redesigned in the RH3 versus the first time it was released. So we are now talking about an RH3 which is got even less sort of lateral play. It's very, very accurate to what you're supposed to get in an acoustic piano. You're supposed to have, you know, millimeter and a half back and forth on a regular key. This is exactly what I'm getting on this RH3. And it's a very, very sensitive, accurate action in terms of its MIDI outputs, triple sensor in this. And the black keys, for some reason, feel like they're more secure than I'm used to as well. It also doesn't feel like the key dip. I don't think this is actually true. This is just the impression it gives, is that the key dip on the black keys isn't quite as deep, which I like. You've got a nice matte micro texture on both the white and the black keys, so really they're not trying to mimic ivory, they're not trying to mimic ebony. They're just coming up with a key surface that has a nice balance between grippy and slippery. It seems to work pretty well. And I've mentioned this in a couple other reviews. I do like how Kawai rounds their white keys. For some types of repertoire and for certain players and how they approach the keyboard, that can be a good thing, because keys that aren't quite rounded, and you find this more on digitals than acoustics, it actually becomes a little bit painful over the course of an hour and a half or 2 hours of playing if you're having a lot of repertoire where you've got larger spans that you're attempting, and you've got those harder edges along the white keys. So for people who are really great players, or forget really great players, it has nothing to do with playing level, it's just more of a playing style and a comfort, this is a good thing. I happen to like it. So in terms of the action, RHIII is the same as what you are going to get in a CN39. It's the same as what you're going to get in the CN29. But as I said, even though there's no official, I guess, declaration of this, it is not exactly the same as what you would have got if you had had the RHIII, say, in a first generation ES8. So for people who have been following along the Kawai digital line for several years, that is worth noting, worth bringing up. So we're going to get some specs up on the screen about the action. We're going to be back for our third section where we're going to talk about some of the less musical features, the connectivity options, some of the other functions that this instrument has, and maybe a quick discussion about the cabinetry. So once again, thanks for being with us, and we will be back in just a second. So just like the CN39, this has stereo 1/4 inch ins and stereo 1/4 inch outs. Probably worth a mention that when we hooked our DG30 up to our interface to get an audio out, the sticker that Kawai had applied to those ports was actually reversed. So we had put it into what was supposed to be the out. We weren't getting any signal. So if this was something that's just, obviously it's extremely minor, but if somebody else is out there, either whether you're a retailer, you're in a store, you're in a restaurant, you're at home, and you're fooling around with this, this is not a setting, this is not even a defect of the instrument, this is just some poor worker out there just had a bad Monday and put the label on backwards. So try switching the port, I guess, is the lesson of the day before thinking that it might be something a lot more serious than that. So we've got left and right 1/4 inch in, left and right 1/4 inch out, and that's totally separate from the headphone jacks, which is great. Love when digital piano companies do that. I know Lee does too. We've got 2 headphone jacks out. We've got 1/4 inch and 3.5 mil. Very handy. You don't need to use an adapter. We also have both the USB Type A and Type B connectors, so that means you can put a memory key in here and get audio straight out or MIDI straight out. You can also connect this to the computer using a MIDI cable if you don't want to use the Bluetooth MIDI. In terms of other features, this is all of the stuff that you'd expect. It's got an internal recorder. You can transpose. It's got the metronome. It's got lots of built-in rhythms. It's got a built-in lesson function. You know, the piano doesn't teach you how to play, but if you're using one of several popular methodology books like Alfred's, it will have the repertoire that's already in that book preloaded in here, so it makes it a little bit easier to use as like a practice companion. It's kind of cool. And then the cabinet is done in a genuine black polyester. And this is worth noting because not every piano company that does a black shiny finish actually uses real polyester. Some of them are just basically using black foil and then putting a clear coat over it. Not even close to as durable, both in terms of color as well as just physical damage. So this is real polyester. This is exactly the same finish that goes on a Kawai acoustic grand piano. Kind of cool. It does make it a little bit heavier than it would otherwise be, but it's still pretty easy for 2 people to pick this up. So as I think another reviewer online already mentioned, if you're a restaurant owner and you want to have this movable between an outside patio and inside area, it's really not that hard. You just get 2 employees to kind of pick this up. It's not going to break anyone's back, and you can move it a few yards here, a few yards there, and you are good to go. It also comes with a really attractive key cover and a music stand that can be adjusted in several different heights. And if you want to, the stick on this actually has both half stick, which is actually more like fifth stick, but they still call it half stick. So you can either have it all the way up in the position it is right now, or you can take out that smaller stick and use it that way. I guess basically visually it just makes it a little bit shorter, and it would actually have an acoustic effect on the way the piano sounded. This uses grand feel pedal system, and all that really means is that Kawai has applied 3 different spring pressures to the 3 pedals so that it mimics that of a real grand piano. So the left pedal is actually the most stiff, just like on a real acoustic. The middle one is the least stiff, which is exactly the same as what you get on a sostenuto. And then you've got a damper, which kind of sits about halfway in between. You wouldn't think that you'd notice that as a benefit, but you actually kind of do notice it as a benefit. So thank you so much for sticking with us through this review of the DG30. I'm so glad that Kawai has now added this to their lineup. This is going to, by the way, compete really, really nicely against, say, Roland's GP607, which is in a fairly similar price range and a fairly similar feature set. In fact, watch out for a comparison video between those 2 models coming up fairly shortly. We are going to do that within the next couple of weeks and get it out for you to see. So thank you so much again for watching another review video here on the Merriam Pianos YouTube channel. My name is Stu Harrison. If you have not yet subscribed, please do so. We love seeing new people join the community, participate in commenting. We try and participate in the comments as much as we possibly can. And folks, this is all about just the love of pianos. Whether you're enjoying listening to them or possibly shopping for them, we're here to help and enjoying the fun. So we'll see you back for more videos shortly. Thanks so much for watching.